Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Rebecca Aguilar, SPJ's president-elect and a freelance reporter based in Dallas, Texas. Today, we will be hearing from Guillermo Galdos, one of the best international correspondents in the world. But first, a reminder that this series of conversations is part of the SPJ international community's aim to keep all of us informed about what is going on around the world and who is covering the stories. Now, during this conversation, we want to hear from you. So please put your questions in the Q&A feature on the bottom of the screen. Dan Kabufsky, one of the co-chairs of SPJIC, will be helping us out and will share your questions with us. Now, please let us know if you want to ask the question yourself. Also joining us is Elle Tusi. She's also the other co-chair. She will be tweeting and doing all that kind of business. Dan, by the way, say hi to the audience. Can we hear you?
Hi.
Hey there, everybody.
Good.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
So let's get to our invited guest. Guillermo Galdos is a producer, a filmmaker, a photojournalist. He has spent the last 20 years making documentaries and producing exclusive stories from Central and South America. Guillermo has focused on the untold stories and exposed what we need to know. He is the Latin American correspondent for Channel 4 News in the UK, and Guillermo does reports for CNN and other news outlets. Guillermo has covered human rights abuses, the drug trade, immigration, and exposed police corruption. He's even had interviews with those who run international drug cartels. So please welcome Guillermo Galdos, who is on assignment right now in Mexico. Welcome, Guillermo.
Hi. Thank you for having me. And yes, I'm actually in the north of Mexico on the way to do a story. We are working at the moment here.
So before we get to that story, because I do want to find out a little bit, and I know that I know it's not a secret assignment, but we're going to keep it under wraps. Before we get started, let's start from the beginning. What inspired you to become a journalist? Who inspired you to become the reporter you are today?
Actually, I've always have been very keen to tell stories, and I consider myself a storyteller. That's mainly what I do. But I remember years ago reading Richard Kapuscinski, and one of his books. He wrote several books, but he was the type of journalist who will go to places and not cover events from hotels or from posh places. He will go and stay on people's homes, and he will go and live the story. And that was the best way to tell stories. And that's what I believe. I believe that if I'm telling the story about a farmer who lost all his crops in Central America, I don't like to go back to the hotel and stay there. I mainly try to stay with my characters so I can have a feel of what is that they're going through in order to tell their story properly.
Now, did you start in, just to give our audience some background, did you start like in local news and then decide I need to go international? Give us a little scope about that.
No, I started with AP, Associated Press in London, and I was working in the international desk, and I used to go out and tell stories in different parts of the world. And then AP Television bought WTN years ago, and APTN, the television side of AP, was established. And I worked for a number of years for a program called Roving Report, where I basically had the opportunity to travel the world and as a one-man camera and reporter, and just go to different places and tell stories. And that was a fantastic exercise. I think that helped me a lot for what I do now.
So you were basically a one-man band way before it became trendy, because that's a trend today.
Yes.
You were doing it way back then. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it's actually, in some occasions, it is better to go alone and to operate alone, because when you arrive to a place with too many people, for example, nowadays when we shoot a documentary, you go with the cameraman, the camera assistant, the sound man, the director, the producer, and at the end you have like 6 people on site. So yes, at the beginning I believe a lot in going alone, traveling alone. I thought that Axis was a lot better as well. It gave me the ability to stay in houses, stay in different places. I remember, for example, something that happened to me in Brazil. we did a big film about the drug gangs in the favelas before the World Cup. And I was staying in Copacabana, where all the journalists stay, in front of the beach, beautiful Rio de Janeiro. But it was not the real Rio de Janeiro that we were trying to portray in the film. So I moved to the favelas and I stayed for a month in a favela filming, but living with the people, living with the families, feeling what they felt at night when they hear gunfire, feeling all these situations that they were living. And that allowed me to tell, I think, the story properly.
I think you bring up some good points right there to our audience. Sometimes working alone, doing it yourself, it's easier to weave in and out, especially difficult situations. And I love the point that you went to live with the people, to feel it, to know it. And obviously from the stories that I've seen of yours, it really comes across. So I know you're in Mexico right now. I know you're on a special assignment. Can you give us a little bit without giving away the story? Are you revisiting a story? Is it a new story? Can you give us a little bit?
We're looking at the story that involves the US and Mexico, but is many of the kind of stories that you've got in Mexico, unsolved massacres, and that's what we're looking at the moment. And I cannot mention more, obviously, because of security reasons, but in Mexico, it's real that we can have 43 students, for example, that are massacred and they disappear from the face of the earth. And until today, we don't know exactly what happened to them. Like that, you've got many massacres. And around here, where I am in Hermosillo, south of here, there was a massacre at the beginning, late 2019 in a particular town, and 15 people were massacred. And it didn't even make the headlines of the local newspapers. So that's how used people have become to this, and we think that it shouldn't be normal. And of course, we're trying to find out why this is happening. And we are not the police. I'm not trying to put people in prison. I'm just trying to understand the madness of the war on drugs.
I think that's what's unique about your storytelling. You always find layers in stories that I haven't heard it anywhere else. I've also seen you put yourself in some very difficult and dangerous situations. Now, one of the things that I see that you extensively do is cover immigration. And, here in the US, we're used to seeing the immigrants and refugees at the border, but, you've traveled with adults and children from their home countries in Central America, basically all the way north up to the US. And you've reported on their dangerous journey and where they come from and that they become victims of crime. Tell us about that. What are we not seeing here that you've seen up close as you see these people? I mean, they become victims of crime again on their journey here. Tell us
yes,
about it.
It was, I've covered, as you said, the immigration quite a lot. I've traveled with women, with children. I've crossed Mexico and the whole of Central America with them. But I remember years ago when I followed a 12-year-old girl that was being taken by a human trafficker from El Salvador to Los Angeles, where her mom and her brothers were there. Her mom had traveled to America 6 years before. So she went to America, she worked for 6 years, she managed to pay her debt with a human trafficker, and then she paid for the trip of her 12-year-old girl. So imagine this girl that she hasn't seen her mom since she was 6. She's 12, and again, I go to this barrio in the outskirts of San Salvador, and I said to her, she was living with her sister, and I said to both of them, would you mind if I stay the night here? I can put my hammock out in the garden. And they said to me, yes, please stay here because it's very dangerous. And when I was at her house at night, somebody came to the door and just unloaded an automatic rifle on the door in front of the door of the house, clearly to tell us they knew that we were there, and they wanted to send a message. But what I felt at that moment, it was the terror that this 12-year-old girl and her sister were feeling on a daily basis. And they were leaving the barrio, the community, and they were jumping on this incredibly dangerous journey because, that girl was about to be raped by the gangs and she had been threatened. But there's so many stories like that if you don't live them, if you don't see them with your eyes, it's difficult to understand why they will do that trip. To make the story short, she ended up in the US. We managed to film part of her trip, but when we entered Mexico, obviously she was handed over to another criminal organization, and they stopped us from filming. And I didn't want to put her at risk, so we left her, and then we met her on the other side of the border. We went and hung around with her mom, and her mom was living there with all the brothers. And, it was the typical story of these Central American family that was working in the fields every day from 5 in the afternoon until 7 at night. And, I didn't see them as a threat to America. Again, I'm not an immigration official to decide that, but I was clearly seeing the reason why they were traveling there. And recently, just a couple of months ago, I went and filmed with a farmer in Guatemala. And he was a farmer, he was a climate migrant. He was a guy that was about to leave his house because he had lost his last 6 crops over the past years. And he had to sell his land in order to pay for the human trafficker, which was $12,000, in order to pay the human trafficker to take him to America. Mm-hmm. And again, you see the reality. And I always think, what is happening to these people that they are doing this incredibly risky trip, risking everything for them to get, robbed or arrested or deported or raped or killed. Yeah. I think like a great percentage of the women that do that trip get abused either by the criminal organizations in Mexico or by the same human traffickers that are moving them. And the human traffickers, they're a big problem in this. They play a big role in this problem because they're profiting from the misery of all those people who want to go and have a safe life.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick here. One of the things that I realize is that I don't know how you do this, and it must be your kind of the style that you use, but you have people, even some of these ruthless violent people, they'll talk to you. You gain their trust. Going back to the coyotes, the traffickers, the people that bring, these people who are paid to bring all these groups of people, whether it's a 12-year-old girl or others, do they ever look at these people as human beings in need, or do they just look at them as a commodity that they can make money off and victimize and just abuse? Do any of them have any human heart?
I haven't, I've never met a coyote that has a human heart. I never. For them, they are transporting cows or horses is the same. They don't know what's behind each person that they're moving, the tragedies that they might have lived in the past. And I can tell you, because I saw this personally, I saw a coyote hustling the girls that he was moving, and he was like trying to take advantage. Many of them were underage. It's quite difficult to watch that, and I'm not the law. I cannot do anything. I try to document the situation as best as I can, so people will understand. But yes, I don't have any respect at all for the human traffickers. I think that they're at the center of the problem, and they take advantage of the situation. And for example, now in Central America, the human traffickers are telling people, oh, you should go to America now because Biden has opened the doors, and they are putting that word forward. So people believe it. And these guys, they're not new guys. They're guys that have been working in this for years. Most of the human traffickers that I've met, they're families. So it's a family business. My father was a human trafficker. I inherited that, and they've been doing it for years. And it is really sad, the situation nowadays.
Just a reminder to anybody in our audience right now, feel free to ask a question. We go with your flow. We want to know what you want to ask Guillermo, because this is a great opportunity to talk to someone who is covering stories beyond the borders here, and definitely issues that are important to us. Let me shift gears a little bit on this one. And again, anybody can ask any question that you want out there. So right now, Guillermo, right now in the United States, you're hearing about the journalists covering all the protests, right? And in some of these cities, the cops are like, we're going to arrest you. Whether you're doing your job or not, we're going to arrest you. And that's the disrespect that they're having for us right now. It's something we're dealing with, okay? But I keep thinking of, what kind of threats do journalists and journalism face in Latin America that we need to know about? Because, I keep thinking about how are the governments, or even like the drug cartels, making your job more difficult and more dangerous?
Yeah, I'll tell you something that actually happens to me a lot when I go to America. And I went there, I think many, many times. I've done many stories in the US, but during the American elections, when Trump was arrested, I lost my passport in Los Angeles. And I was filming with some migrant families. So I went back to Lima, I got a new passport, I got a new I-visa and everything. Since then, every time I go to America, they stop me and they put me in a room and they ask for my phone. And I'm not telling you 1, 2, 3 times, more than 7 times that I've been to America, they've put me in the room and they've obliged me to unblock my phone. And I asked them, what happens?
You're saying the US Customs people?
Yeah, US Customs. And they asked me, listen, they told me the name of my wife. They knew how many the properties I have. They asked me about the films that I've done in Mexico. They asked me about the immigrant family that I follow into the US. They asked me a lot of things in a very polite way. No, they were not rude. Actually, one of the guys said to me, it would be amazing if, to have met you in a different circumstance. And it's not like, they didn't even check my bag. They were asking me questions, about the stories that I've done. But I think that, it's not that I haven't been hassled by the authorities before. I've been detained covering protests. I've been arrested in Colombia for filming in an area where, the government didn't want us to film. But with this, I found that because it's in your phone, you have quite personal things. And I'm not a trafficker. I'm not a delinquent. I'm a journalist. And, I'll give you my phone. No problem. I don't have anything to hide. But I felt really bad, because it's like somebody's telling you, I want to see your private things. And they are checking your WhatsApp and they actually found a WhatsApp from a journalist that sent me from Sinaloa with some pictures of a crime. And they were asking me about it. And it was like, man, I don't know why I don't know why you're doing this. And it's, I thought it was quite interesting because it has not only happened to me. I know several journalists that have, had that in the last few years in America. And especially, for example, foreign correspondents. If you go to Syria or you've been to Iran or you've been to places like that, you get stopped immediately coming into the US. And I don't mind getting stopped, to be honest. I mind when they ask me for my phone, from my laptop, and you need to give your passcodes for them to check things or to install things in your phone. Because I don't know what they're doing with my phone. They disappear, they come back with my phone. So that for me was, I felt a bit humiliated. But, having said that, yes, I've been stopped by the police in Mexico and also I've been stopped by the police in Central America. And actually recently, I confronted the police because the police was not allowing us to cross into an area where we wanted to film the river, the border of Mexico and Guatemala. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, there were buses full of migrants that were going by and crossing with no problem, but they stopped us, the journalists. Why? Because we had a camera. And they didn't want the world to see that was Mexico's back door completely open with no security. And, the US gave millions to Mexico and to Central America to stop immigration. And those millions clearly were not being used properly. And these guys were not doing their job. So, yes, in Peru as well, we've had problems. Problems where you have to stand up and tell the authorities I'm doing my job. You know, recently as well, I got stopped by the army in Peru, and they didn't want me to go through to an area in the Amazon. This was during the pandemic, and they were telling me, listen, if you go there, they're going to lynch you. And I said, no, they're not. You know, I want to see what's happening there. The thing is, there was the number of COVID cases in this area in the Amazon were extremely high. And the army was saying to me, you cannot go in. And I said, listen, I just been tested. I'm negative. You know, everybody is sick inside. I want to see what's happening there. And they were not allowing me until at the end, they had to allow me, because I called a couple of, people in the government. And I said, listen, they're stopping me from doing my job. I'm going at my own risk to report on what's happening in this place. So you will get a lot with the authorities.
But let me ask you this, and because in every country it's different, whether you're in Honduras or Peru or Mexico. How do you know how much pushback you can give before they're like, let's just arrest this guy? Or in some cases, I'd be afraid you'd be hurt even more. How much pushback? Do you know the personality of each of these law enforcement in different countries? Because it seems like there's a lot of anti-journalists or anti-us people out there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pusher. I push, but I'm not silly as well, and I'm very respectful of the authorities. Whenever they stop me, if it's in America or in Brazil, doesn't matter. I know that I let them know that I know that they are doing their job, but I explain to them very well that I'm doing mine and what's the importance of my job. The problem is when they are trying to cover something that they don't want you to see, film, or report to the world. And that's when you enter a dangerous territory. I put you another example. In Peru, they killed 3 indigenous leaders in the border of Peru and Brazil. And they were killed by the drug traffickers, because Peru is one of the main producers of cocaine in the world. And we have a huge border with Brazil. Brazil is the second consumer of cocaine in the world after the US, but the #1 consumer of crack cocaine. Yeah, so all the rivers on the Amazon that flow from Peru into Brazil have turned into highways for the drug traffickers to put drugs into Brazil. So I knew this guy that I met years ago. Suddenly I get news that he had been killed together with 2 other leaders, and there is no communication there. Obviously, somebody sent me a message and they told me that the widows were coming down to a town in the Amazon. So I went to the town to meet the widows. They knew me. So I met them, I stayed with them for 2 days. And then, I was asking the authorities, I want to go to the place, take me in a helicopter. I want to go to the place. And they took weeks to get there. And I told them, if the guys who were killed there were 3 Americans or 3 Europeans, you had been there with helicopters within hours of the killing. But because they were indigenous people, you took weeks to get there. And of course, when they arrived, the bodies had disappeared. The caimans, the animals, the jaguars, they've eaten them and scattered them all over the jungle. But at the end, I went to the community. It took us several days. And I think that's also part of the good backing that I have from Channel 4 or from the people that I work, that it's not normal that somebody will pay you 6 days to go to a place. It took me 6 days to get there, and it was 4 days to come back. But to tell the story of this community, to see the reality. And we went there with the community, and they found bits of the bodies inside the river. And it was a horrific scene, but it actually, it was so disgusting that it told you how humiliated that community was, that nobody from the government had appeared there to say, listen, I'm sorry, we're going to help you. So that's why we went, because nobody went.
Did any other media go? I mean, it just seems like you...
No, not even the local Peruvian channels went, because again, it was remote. But I've been covering quite a lot of stuff in the Amazon, and I know quite a lot of indigenous leaders there, and I knew that this guy's murder was very symbolic. Why? Because 2 months before they killed him, he said on camera that he was going to be dead. So it was a chronicle of an announced death, basically, and nobody did anything.
Let me backtrack a little bit. When you said that you're stopped, at the U.S. border and they take your phone, I guess, customs and that kind of thing. And you said they know your work. Are you saying they have a file on you that they're basically
sure.
going, okay, yeah, we know your work.
Listen,
Here's your.
I'm sure. I tell you something which was really funny. The last time they came to look for me, they were not waiting outside the plane. As soon as they put the tunnel, at the door of the plane,
Mhm.
2 guys came in, they went to my seat and they said to me, Guillermo Galdos, yes, please get your things and come with us. So I walk, and when I'm walking with them, I said, I know why you're doing this. This is like the 7th time they do it, but anyway, thank you very much because I'm going to skip the queues. Yeah. And, but then he says to me, he asks about the surname of my wife. He mentions the surname of my wife. My wife is English. And he asked me if my wife was related to an actress. He wanted to let me know that he knew, who I was married with. And he starts telling me things just to let me know that they know everything about me. And I was like, fine, thank you. I mean, it's a nice welcome. And I love America. To be honest, I really like when I go there, and I enjoy a lot the country, but it deters me from going, because it's when you have to go to a place where all the time they're checking your phone or they're asking you to open your laptop to see what you have inside. I'm not a criminal, and I'm not willing to put myself in a place where I have to show all the pictures of my family all the time to these guys. What about if I have private pictures? There's zero privacy, and I don't know what they think. And they're asking me things about my reports, and I said, listen, everything is online. You can watch everything that I do. I'm not an undercover guy. I'm there telling, the stories that I tell. And at the end, one of the guys, as I said, he was really nice. And he said, listen, I wish we could have had a coffee and chat together in a different circumstance. They always, tell me to go, and there is no problem. But the fact that they ask you for your phone or your laptop, I think is a little bit, it makes me feel bad as a professional, and it makes me feel like they are not respecting my work, and that's how I feel.
Well, I think it's just a reminder, especially when it comes to U.S. federal authorities, that they're saying Big Brother is here and
Yes.
we're watching you. And so just know that we know your wife's last name and probably where she shops every day. I mean, it is an intimidation ploy. And even as us reporters who cover immigration here in the U.S., believe me, we've had our situations like that. Let me remind the audience, if you want to see Guillermo's work, I mean, all you have to do is Google him, but there's a ton of stuff on YouTube. And let me tell them this, Guillermo, he has covered COVID in Peru, dodging bullets in Brazil's Wild West, illegal gold mining in the Amazon, illegal fishing on Peru's coastline. That was a great story, by the way. All of these are. And an interview, again, with one of Mexico's biggest drug lords called La Tuta. He gave Guillermo his last interview before he was arrested. And when I look at the scope of work, Guillermo, I keep thinking, I mean, I just saw the one that you put on Twitter with the illegal fishing on Peru's coast, where just, I mean, it got to me because the seals and all that. You put yourself in danger. Has it gotten to the point where, I hate to say this, but where you thought, I'm not going to make it out of this assignment?
No, I've had several of those. And I tell you, I think I remember the first time I was in a firefight in my life. I mean, a big shooting. And I was in Colombia, and we got stuck in the middle of a firefight between the army and the guerrillas. And I realized how real the war was, because it was Latin America. It was something that you saw in the movies or whatever, but we were there, and it was real, and the suffering that it caused. Then I spent quite a lot of time in Iraq. I went 4 times to Iraq. I was actually working for CNN at the beginning there, but we saw as well the horrific sides of the human being. But I think with time now, I don't go to places I think nowadays I don't go to war, to places like where you have more action. There are journalists that cover more wars than me. What I like to do is I like to tell normal stories that will explain situations which are not clear to people. And from illegal fishing, as you said, to gold mining. I mean, on that illegal gold mining story, we had to leave that place in the Amazon because we were threatened again. It was the local police that were in bed with the illegal miners, and when they realized what we were doing and that we had filmed in a mine, you know, they went after us, and yes. But I think I I approach things straight, and I am clear to everybody. It doesn't matter if it's a narco in Mexico or if it's a doctor in intensive care in Peru. I go straight and I explain to them why is that I'm there and what is that the story that I want to tell. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm a storyteller. You know, I wanted to, for example, with the COVID issue, I wanted to show Peruvians how bad our health system was, and how it collapsed, and how privileged, you know, that 5% of the country that has, you know, a little bit of money, how privileged they were, because the majority of the country was going through a nightmare. And being with a family that is trying to find oxygen, and there is no oxygen. It doesn't matter if you have money or not. Or following a lady that is crossing the Andes by foot with her daughters, you know, to get home, escaping COVID, escaping all her dreams, because all her life she dreamed to go to the city. But suddenly it was migration at reverse. And this was the first time I saw it. Normally people come from the Andes into the cities. This was from the big cities in the coast. They were going back to the Andes, escaping hunger, escaping everything. And that sort of that was like more an observational documentary where you interact very little. You were there like an eye, looking at things and obviously asking questions and trying to portray what that person is feeling at that time as close to reality.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about your pieces. You know, you make me feel like, you know, and again, I recommend to the audience right now, go look at the piece that he put on Twitter about the illegal fishing that's going on in the coastline of Peru. I mean, I felt like I was on that boat for you. I felt like, oh my gosh, when that seal or, you know, was trying to escape the net, and you got, and everybody's struggling, and, you know, there's that it's chaotic. You take me there. I feel it. And I think that is the best storytelling, because of course, I'm not going to take a plane and go to Peru and go to the coast, but you take me there. Or the same thing when the illegal, you know, all the illegal fishing or the gold mining in Amazon, you take me deep in there. I keep wondering this. I mean, do any of these people, and understand I've done most of my career in local news, and I've had the people call, I hated that story, or somebody say, I'm not happy with that story you did. For you, who's interviewed people like heads of drug cartels, do they ever get back to you and say, I didn't like that story? And you know, these are, I mean, in my opinion, very dangerous people. Even the coyotes, do they ever call you or contact you or tweet you and say, I didn't like that? And does that ever scare you?
When I interview people like that, the first thing that I say is, listen, I need to ask you the proper questions. I cannot ask you, oh, how was your, your childhood, how beautiful you are. No, because I'm a journalist, you know, I need to. And for example, with the coyote, with the last documentary I did that is actually going out on Channel 4, I think at the beginning of May, and it's about this climate migrant. I sat down with the coyote in a cafe, like on the road from Guatemala to Mexico. And I asked him in front of the people that he was taking, I asked him, are you trafficking meat? You know, because that's what I could see. There was no feelings, nothing. For him, the people that he was moving were sacks of potatoes. And I asked him and I said, do you know, and many people will think that, what you are doing is not human. You are taking advantage of the misery of these guys. And and you are, not even guaranteeing their lives, and they have to pay you a lot of money, and you know that. And the guy said, no, he responded, and he said, like, I'm doing them a favor because they have the need to get to America and I have the contacts. That was his mentality. But I've had people calling me, yes. I've had death threats many times, but not from people that I was interviewing, from people that were related to issues that I was investigating. And I know 4 journalists in Mexico, friends of mine, that have been killed in the last 4 years or 5 years. 2 of them very close to me, people that I worked a lot with. And you think like, oh, nothing is going to happen to them because, they are stars, they're incredibly good. Nothing. And also I've had, apart from journalists, I know several mothers or brothers of people who disappeared, and they were looking for the relatives, and on that trip trying to unearth what happened to the relatives, they got also killed. So how do you approach that story? I know, I remember a guy that his name was Miguel, and I actually like him quite a lot, and he got really involved in helping families to find their relatives. And they were going into the desert and digging everywhere and confronting the authorities and telling them, why are you not digging? Why you're not doing enough to find my relative? And at the end, when you see that, actually, it makes me, I don't want to stop. I don't want to stop because, if we don't say anything, if we don't actually go a little bit further to tell the story, to confront the authorities, the people in charge, where are we going to go? I think that the madness of the war on drugs in Latin America is affecting us so much. I mean, you see the example in Mexico. Peru and Colombia, they're producers of cocaine, and the amount of cocaine nowadays in the international markets is even bigger, a lot bigger of what it was before. The narcos, they've got the techniques, they produce, cocaine with less ingredients. Nowadays, they've hired the best agronomists so the plants can produce more, leaves, and they can produce more plants in smaller lands. And that has changed everything. And I keep thinking that drug trafficking, which is taking this region down the hole, is allowing for these guys to corrupt all the authorities across this region.
Yeah, and I think a good reminder, Guillermo, right now, as you're telling us about like all the, the cocaine that is indefinitely in South America, it's a reminder to the journalists in our country that even though we are concentrating on what's going on with the recent, cases going on in the United States that evolved with the protests and the pandemic and what's going on at the border, we have to remember that among all this is still that whole drug, problem that continues to grow in Latin America and then has a ripple effect into the United States. Let me get back to something real quick on yours. You said that you've had friends reporters who have been killed from Mexico. You've had sources basically that have also, died, who've been killed. And what I'm getting from what you're saying is, although it's tragic and they were your friends, you could have been easily the reporter that says, I've had it, no more, ya no más, I'm not doing this anymore. But what you did with that tragedy is it's your fuel to keep going. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, indeed. I feel that I have like a commitment. When you're a doctor, you do your Hippocratic, thing, and you actually swear to protect human lives. I have this thing where I think I have the ability to tell stories and to tell stories that are complicated, and it's my duty to tell them, to explain to my kids why Peru, Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, in the future, what happened that put us in that position. Because I'm a great believer that you could solve the problem with drugs in a short time. And we've been more than 30 years and billions of dollars and everything. Actually, it was the 50th anniversary. This year, I think it's the 50th anniversary since Nixon declared the war on drugs, if I'm not wrong. In July will be. And 50 years, let's say, 30 years of Plan Colombia, 20 years, I don't know how many years, billions of dollars. The amount of people who have died in that war, not only in Colombia, Peru, Mexico, and we are how we are. It's worse, the situation. Do you have less cocaine in America? No. And America is the number one consumer of cocaine in the world, by far. And when you think in that context, it's like, I cannot understand it because I've seen what that war has generated, on the other side of the chain. And that's, I want to see, the day I will believe in the drug war is the day I see, the big managers of big banks being arrested for money laundering. Because we all know who the banks are. There's been extensive reports. They've actually said sorry. But when you tell that story to somebody that, for example, has been arrested with paraphernalia to smoke marijuana and he has a really bad time, and then, that's the war on drugs. The guy in Latin America, probably the police will get money out of him. He will get into trouble. He will need to bribe the authorities in order not to have a problem. That creates corruption and everything. But then on the other hand, you have these banks that launder billions of dollars from Mexican drug traffickers. You have, all the weapons that you have in this country, they come from America. All the bullets that kill Mexican people here come from America. They don't come from China. They don't come from Russia. So what are we talking about? This is common sense.
Yeah. And the bottom line is that the whole world of drugs is very organized and powerful people. And as long as they have profits and they have people that will move it and people that will buy it and countries that, just really don't buckle down on them, it will continue. I mean, you and I have been covering this from different angles for a long time. I'm just going to switch gears a little bit here because, you are one of the best in the world in covering international affairs. For someone out there who does want to do what you do, because, there's a lot of students in schools right now going, I want to be that person that travels the world and looks at and does stories like yours, how do you encourage them to do it? Is it possible, to go from just covering local news to doing what you're doing? What do they need to be able to do what you're doing and have the passion after more than 20 years that you've been covering some really, really important stories, but dangerous at the same time? What advice do you have for them?
I will recommend for them to read a lot, and I think is very important. As I said, Richard Kapuscinski, it marked me. It marked me because he showed me that there was this type of journalism where you actually, and I've seen this before when I used to work in the agencies, basically covering news. You can see when you go, for example, you go to Equatorial Africa to report, in Liberia or something like that, and you will see the guys that stay in the hotel and they cover the event from the hotel. And I remember that very clear. And obviously the photographers and the videographers, they had to go out and get the pictures. But then it was how you put all that in context. And I would tell, if somebody wants to be a journalist and you want to tell stories, I mean, you just need to be convinced of yourself. And you need to, because information is power. If you want to do something about buses in America, for example, or if you want to do something about, water in South America or whatever, just research that subject, and you need to feel that you know a lot about it and do proper research. Because once you manage that information and that makes you valuable and obviously, if you want to tell the story, that is so important. But for me, the most important thing is that you want to do it. And I've met a number of very good storytellers, really young people actually that has just left university and they are moving around. I know somebody who works with me who is 24 years old, and he's been traveling with us since he was 19, and he's incredibly talented, and he's a natural storyteller.
I have to ask, as a woman, is it more difficult for a woman do you believe in doing what you're doing?
No, I don't think so. I think that obviously Latin America is a world of machos, and that can not play well. But in my experience, if you're a woman and you are very professional, I've seen some incredible female reporters doing amazing work. And in places like Iran, Afghanistan, Colombia, places which you will think that are very difficult for women, but not.
Yeah. All right. We have, like 10 minutes left. I'm going to ask, Al, Dan, anything you want to ask? Anything out there that we need to ask Guillermo while we have him with us?
Yeah, Guillermo, this is Dan. I'd like you to just talk a little bit more about the threats to you from the non-governmental organizations, the narcos, maybe any type, maybe paramilitary groups, in trying to do your stories. I mean, you talked about the government, some of the government problems, but there are a lot of non-government players as well.
Yes,
who are making your life
completely
difficult. And how do you deal with that?
Recently, one of the most recent issues that I had working as a journalist was in December. I went to Colombia to tell the story on how COVID, the pandemic, had helped criminal organizations to recruit minors. And the recruitment of minors went up tremendously during the pandemic in Colombia, simply because the kids were not going to school. So they were at home all day, and in rural areas where you have people like FARC or the different criminal organizations that now you've got operating in Colombia, when they go by and then suddenly they see a 12-year-old boy, they offer him a new uniform, even some food, and the kids leave. So we went to investigate that, and we got stopped by FARC. And I've met in the past, I've encountered them many times in Colombia, but these were the new FARC, because FARC, they signed a peace process with the government in 2016, and they handed over the weapons, and then a couple of groups stayed in the jungle, and they took charge of the business, etc., etc. But sorry, they were like, I don't trust them at all. But we got stopped, and we were there for 6 hours trying to explain them that what we were doing, and that we were not reporting against them. We were following a family whose kid had been killed, in the war, etc. So yes, it's everybody. It doesn't matter if it's the government, the narcos, the politicians, or criminals. If they see that you are on the way, or you get on the way, they will try to move you out, maybe with a warning or with a bullet or some way. So that's, I think, the art of, when you tell these stories, you need to go how to move around them, and so if you're going to piss off people, make sure that you're not there when they get pissed off.
That's a good piece of advice. Let me ask you real quick about, let's talk about your family, because, they bring it up, like you said, Border Patrol brings them up. Does your wife ever say, okay, Guillermo, that's enough, that's it?
When she met me, I was a journalist, and she met me, and I was traveling. I was a storyteller. She met me like this. I think she accepted me like this. And she knows I tell her what I'm doing and stuff like that. And I think she trusts my, my judgment. And but I think it will be very difficult to move me to a desk and make me stay there. I will always be telling stories. And as you said, it doesn't matter if it's in Mexico dealing with the narcos or in the middle of the ocean, trying to tell the world that the Chinese fleet is cleaning our oceans. But you have to do it. There's always a risk. And the most important thing in this business for me is to minimize those risks. The risks are going to be all around, but you need to minimize them. For example, for me, don't travel at night, check the areas that you're going to get through and see if there's been any recent fighting. You need to do a proper risk assessment and see who is who are the players in the area where you're going to move, how corrupt the authorities are, other events that happened in the past. So my wife knows that I do quite a lot of security assessments and I take security very, very seriously. And also, I'm convinced I'm not a policeman or I'm not here to come and arrest someone. I'm just telling a story, and that's what I'm telling people. Some people might not like the story, but that's no thing.
One important question is, and answer this for the audience, what does freedom of the press mean to you?
It's to be able to tell the world the things that we don't normally see. And I think that the world is being told a story, but when you have the opportunity as a journalist to go back and to go deep and to come out and with something that people don't know, the ability to be able to expose that without getting killed, harassed, or, without them giving you hassle. I mean, I put you another example. I have a friend of mine who has exposed serious abuses of the Catholic Church in Peru. She, at the moment, has 9 trials against her. And that is not freedom of press. And like that, I can mention several. I've been taken to court several times. I did once a report on looters, people who were looting Inca tombs in the desert in Peru. And when I exposed that, the Peruvian government, they tried to sue us. Obviously, they lost, but they basically were saying that we witnessed an illicit act and we didn't do anything. And I said, I'm a journalist. I was driving in the desert and I saw 60 people digging there. And you're telling me that I was an accomplice. I said, you should be going there. And then they tried to push me to tell them where it was. And I said to them, listen, it was in this area. I didn't know the names of the people that I filmed, but they harassed me. And they harassed me because I exposed the fact that Peru was not protecting its heritage and that it was open for anyone to loot. And all those pieces that these guys, these gold pieces of incredibly beautiful ceramics that they take out of these Inca tombs, they end up in private collections or museums in Europe. So that's what we were saying. And they tried to stop us. And at the end, they didn't manage to stop us.
Well, first of all, now I'm going to wrap this up. I just want to say, Guillermo, thank you. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. I learned a lot today. I know the audience learned a lot today. I hope you keep pushing forward. By the way, everyone, the SPJ international community is still working on future programs. Look at this. I mean, we have Guillermo from Mexico. This is why this community is so important. Dan, also, I think you put a link to the international community in the chat window. Also subscribe to the community's newsletter because you're going to get the latest information and we'll probably find out where Guillermo is next. And so, again, thank you, Guillermo, for everything.
Thank you very much.
Your time. Everyone, follow him on Twitter. Follow him because he posts his stories and and we can see where he is every day, and we will see what the story he's working on in Mexico. Guillermo, be careful out there. Everyone else, until next time, have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.